All right, we're back with another episode. I have with me today my buddy Justin Hammond. Justin, what is up, man? How you doing today?
Fantastic, man. It's really good to be on here with you and happy to happy to chat with you via podcast.
Absolutely. Well, we had a really good conversation, a couple weeks ago, and I'm like,
Yeah.
shoot, I should have hit record because this conversation was mind blowing, and that's for me. And so I can't imagine how much value the listener is going to get from this conversation today. So really excited about that, and really just kind of excited to share your story. When we met, I really resonated with your story because I, I I saw a lot of consistencies with how you got started and with how I got started. But for people who don't know who you are, man, kind of take them back. Like who are you, and then how did you get into real estate investing?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, but I mean, basically, back in 2015, um, I just really knew I wanted to be an investor, and I didn't know much more than that, but I knew that for whatever reason, the investment game really appealed to me. I'd flip through the Forbes list and see, all these guys on there that either founded some tech company or they were an investor. And for whatever reason, the guys that were the tech founders, it didn't really sing to me. But the guys who were hedge fund managers and private equity guys and real estate investors, like those were the ones who really made an impression on me and made me feel like, wow, that's like those were my heroes. And so in 2015, I was working with a tech company as a salesman, and um, I was there kind of early on to try to work with a startup and play the whole startup game with them. But things weren't going according to plan, and so I left. And when I left, I really just kind of 2 feet in went full time um, into real estate. And up until that point, I'd been like reading, I'd been listening to podcasts and stuff like that, but I didn't have any money, I didn't have any experience or anything like that. So I literally just told my wife like, hey, it's kind of now or never. We had at the time we had our first kid on the way, and I just kind of could see down the road that the timing was never going to be better for me to go be an entrepreneur. So I just decided I'm going to go and become a real estate investor, whatever that meant. And at the time, I knew enough to know to look for motivated sellers, and so I was knocking on doors. I was sending out letters, racking up credit card debt, trying to find motivated sellers. And I finally stumbled onto this lady who she said she had just gotten done with a divorce and really needed to liquidate her house. And this was 6 months after I had gone full time. So like 6 months in, I still don't have a deal. I'm spending money, spending all my time. Um, and I finally found this lady who, she let me into her house. I go in there with like a clipboard. I acted
You knew
like I knew what I
exactly
was.
what you were doing, right? You look
100%. Like I definitely looked the part. I'm like looking at the furnace and like how old's the roof, and I'm knocking on walls. It's a load bearing wall. I didn't know anything, but um, I'm writing down these notes, and at the end of that walkthrough, I sat down with her, and the part that came naturally to me was this part with her where I'm asking her questions, and I'm like, how much debt do you have on the house? How much other debt do you have? Do you have any credit cards? Do you have any cars that need to be paid off? How much do you need to give your ex-husband? And she's being really open with me and transparent with me, and I'm keeping notes on all these things. And the house stuff like didn't really do much for me. Like how old the furnace was, that didn't really affect me. But like her telling me that she had $9,000 in credit card debt and that she owed $17,000 on her car and that she had to give her ex-husband a certain amount of money. All that stuff really resonated with me. And I could kind of put the pieces together to like, okay, so that means that if I could get her this number for her house, which at the time it was $250,000. I showed her that like, hey, if I gave you 250K, then you can pay off your mortgage, you can get your ex-husband taken care of, you can pay off your car, you can pay off your credit cards. I go through this whole list, and she just said, "Oh my gosh, it'd be amazing." And I knew, I knew on my way over there by calling my realtor buddy that it was the ARV on the house was like 400,000 plus, and so I knew that there was some money to be made. Once I got the property under contract, I just had no idea where to go from there, other than to call all the people that I knew and ask them for money. No one was interested, but luckily, after finally cold calling someone basically and having them meet me at the house, he convinced me to wholesale it to him. And
Smart man.
Yeah. So I ended up with like $22,000, and I paid half of that to my realtor buddy because that was kind of part of the deal that we had. And then instead of paying off my credit card debt, I put that down on an FHA duplex and had to kind of start from square one again because I still had the credit card debt and didn't have any money. So another couple months later, we found our next deal, and things just kind of snowballed from there, and we were able to just kind of never look back.
I love this, dude. So we're gonna rewind just a little bit. What I love is that you remember so many of these details of the first deal. And I always tell people, like, when you're working on your first deal, you will always remember that first deal. And it sounds so familiar. Anytime I hear a story of somebody's first deal, I just remember what that first deal was like. And so I got to ask, like, how important was that first deal to you? And what was your wife thinking after doing this for 6 months and not making a single dollar? Like, what was that like? Because I know how it was for me, because I was in the same boat. 6 months, got the first deal, made 22,000, split with the partner. Like, that's how identical these things are.
Wow.
So I got to ask you, man, like, how was that? Like, did you have education? Did you figure this out on your own? What were some of the emotions that were going through your brain when you didn't have a deal for 6 months?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was, those are the parts that you kind of don't convey as often. It's kind of like you run through a patch of rose bushes, and at the time all you feel are the thorns, but then you look back and all you see are the roses type thing.
100%.
Like, I look back and you just see, oh yeah, the deal worked out. But if I were to really put myself in that situation again, like, I mean, there were a lot of thorns, man. Like, every day was taxing. It's like, we're not talking like I was doing this part-time for 90 minutes. Like, dude, I mean, I was doing this for 13, 14 hours a day, like riding my bike around town, knocking on doors, approaching mailmen, trying to get them to give me their phone number. And anytime that they found a house that needed work, they would reach out to me. I mean, but where the real test kind of came into play for me was actually after that first deal, because I had put all the money on a down payment. Then, we were back to square one, and let's see, this was December that we did the first deal of 2015. And my wife's due to have a baby in at the very, very beginning of May. And another month goes by without a deal. And then another month goes by without a deal. And pretty soon it's the end of March, and I still haven't done another deal. And my wife comes to me, and she's super supportive, but she was like, listen, like, we're about to have a baby. And she's like, I'm not going to be able to work, at least for a while. And so it might be time for you to get a job. She said the J word at me.
Yeah.
And And I was like, okay, listen, uh, tell me what I need to do. How much money do I need to bring in between now and when the baby's born for you to believe that I can do this forever? And she said, well, she thought about it logically. And she's like, well, we have to pay off our credit card debt, which we owe about $10,000. And then we also need to make enough money to live for the next couple months. So let's call it $20,000. So I wrote out this contract, and the contract said, I promise to make $20,000 by April 30th, 2016. If I do not make $20,000 by that date, I promise to never bring up real estate investing again. And I'll get a job to support our family, and I'll never become an entrepreneur. But if I do, I need your full support forever. And right. And so we both signed this agreement, and this was at the end of March. So I had about a month, and I went out and I finally found this deal that was going to foreclosure. And dude, I got to tell you, I've never had more adversity in one deal than I did on this one. But I got this property under contract, and we found out there were bankruptcy issues. The bankruptcy court had to sign off on some stuff. And then we finally get all that resolved, and we get down to closing. And the seller, who's this elderly lady, she doesn't have a driver's license. And she needs this ID to convey title over, right? And so I'm like, where's your ID? She's like, oh, it's at my house somewhere. So I drive her to her house. Her house is a complete hoarder house, like floor to ceiling, disgusting, nastiest hoarder house you've ever seen.
Somewhere in that pile of stuff, right?
Yep. She's like, I think it's somewhere in this room. And I'm like, all right, let's go. And I get like, I roll up my sleeves, like we're just digging through boxes. And dude, after like 3 hours of just shuffling through everything, I found her driver's license. And lo and behold, it happened to be like the one that was still current and active. We drove back over to the title company and closed the deal, and I made $30,000 on that deal. And this was like the third week of April, like at the buzzer before this agreement expired.
Unbelievable.
And my daughter was born a week later. And yeah, like I said, like moving on, it's just kind of snowballed from there. And we've never been kind of up against that type of, we've felt pressure like that, but in different ways. It was, self-applied pressure as opposed to like, this is make it or break it, back against the wall pressure.
Wow. I get chills hearing this story because I remember what that was like when I had that type of pressure. And here's the thing. A lot of people go into these scenarios. Maybe they don't write up a contract. I think that's pretty cool that you wrote that contract. And you actually honored that thing too. But they go into these scenarios, and the stress, the pressure, it's so real. What do you say to somebody who's in that like situation or going through something like that? Like, because I remember all the stories that I had going through my mind at that time. But dude, kudos to you for pushing through and make that happen. Like, what do you say to somebody who is going through that right now and isn't sure what to expect? Like, and how this can yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely faith is a huge part of that. Like, you have to believe that it's possible, and you have to believe it like with every fiber of your being that it's possible. But then you have to get off your butt and like actually do something about it. And so that was the biggest thing for me was like, the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill was a big part of it for me. It was just going through those steps that he outlines in that book of, like doing the affirmations, like repeating to yourself that this is possible. Like for me, that was a big part of it, was that whole recipe that Napoleon Hill lines out. Was like repeating it, visualizing it, believing it, feeling it, visualizing myself accomplishing it, those were all a major part of my daily repertoire going into it. And so I would say that is a big part of it. I also think reading biographies is huge. Like when you can read biographies of people who have who are on the Forbes list, you very quickly, once you're on your fifth or sixth biography, you realize like, okay, so these guys weren't just born with some special like path to become a billionaire or be successful. These are people that were ordinary people like you and I, who just had a desire to make something happen and who faced tons of challenges along the way, but were able to overcome those challenges and push through. And so I think applying that think and grow rich mentality and that think and grow rich formula, coupled with constantly taking on biographies or stories of people who have made it, it kind of just gets you to the point where you can clearly see the path towards success, and you see that there's tons of obstacles in the way, but you see that it's possible. And you see that all you have to do is get over those obstacles, and you'll be on the other side. The other thing that those biographies do that I've noticed is like, everybody has this what I like to call a financial thermostat, right? When you think about how a thermostat works, right? It's like, once it gets too cold, the heat kicks on. Once it gets too hot, the AC kicks on, right? And the other day I was with my wife, and we saw this homeless person who's begging for money. And I'm like, isn't that interesting how like at some point it became too uncomfortable for this person to where they were actually able to get off their butt and go out and have uncomfortable conversations with these cars that were passing by and ask for money. But it wasn't until their bank account was literally like zero that they took action. And so what I've learned is that people who are really successful, that thermostat is just really, really, really hot, right? Like the heat kicks on even when they've got millions and millions of dollars. The heat's just constantly working. And so what studying the lives of these successful people does is it kind of aligns your thermostat with theirs to be like, oh, like $1 million isn't a lot of money. So if I don't have that, I have to hurry and get it. And even once I have it, I have to continue to work because my thermostat's just still working, still going, because that's not my base level. That's not my level that I need to be. So I think those two things kind of are big. Like that's kind of what I would tell people who just constantly feel that discouragement or feel that need to kind of take the next step.
I heard mindset. I heard faith. I heard, really, without saying it, surrounding yourself, even if it's through a biography, with people and beliefs and conversations that are going to level you up to another level of what is even possible, right? Did you start that kind of simultaneous to your journey of real estate investing, of studying Think and Grow Rich and studying these books? Or was this something that you were doing long before you started in real estate? Because I know for me, it all kind of happened at the same time. It's like, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to do these real estate deals, but I got to get my mind right. I got to start surrounding myself with people who can kind of think the same type of way. What was it for you? Was it before, simultaneous?
Yeah, I mean, it was before. It was definitely quite a bit before, and that's kind of how I was able to filter through who my heroes were. Right? Was like, which I think that's a big thing. Like if you know where to set your sights, that has a big impact. So for me, it was before. It was just like, I read like Rich Dad Poor Dad when I like pretty early on, and that's kind of where I realized that like my inability to focus in school and stuff was like really that was really okay, and that was really kind of just a reflection of the positive attributes of who I am rather than, oh, like I'm not smart. Um, and so early on, I kind of benefited from that. And then I just kind of, I think from the time, let's see, from the year 2011 until even now, 2022. So 11 years, I've read over 70 books a year for
Wow.
the last 11 years. So that's been a big part of it for me.
What a cheat code too, right? Like books, they're not some crazy expense, right? Like I've bought
Yeah.
well over 100 books myself in the last 2 years, and I never loved to read prior to, but I can tell you all of that information, all of these past experiences. This is all just free knowledge and information, and it's like a cheat code that you're soaking all of that in. You're learning from those people's experiences, and so I just can't emphasize how important that is for people who are listening. And by the way, guys, get ready because if you haven't gotten value yet, you're about to get flooded because we're going to talk about how Justin is buying a bunch of houses. But it all started with the mindset, right? It all started there.
For sure.
So if you're getting value, guys, make sure to share this out. Tell a friend out there. But let's go back to that first deal, man. Let's do kind of a little bit of a case study here. How did you find that deal? And you said you made 30,000 on it. Did you wholesale it, or how did that shake out?
Are you talking about the first one or the second one?
Excuse me, the second one.
Yeah. So the second one, I found that deal through knocking on doors of people who were behind on payments, who had a date for foreclosure. And then I ended up wholesaling it to a land developer. It was on like a big piece of land, not a big, for the area, it was a big piece of land. It was on just over an acre. And so I wholesaled it to a guy that wanted to build townhomes on it.
Awesome. Beautiful. Okay. So you seeked him out and he bought it, he paid you the fee, and you cashed out on it. So from there, you've proven to your wife that you got this. You made the money. You're going to be able to make this work. What was the next part of your journey like? And because I know that was your niche. You were finding foreclosures. How long did it take before you started to feel comfortable to start acquiring a lot of the deals that you were coming across? Because I think a lot of people, including myself, we know how to make money in real estate. And this belief has changed for me. I've worked out the muscles quite a bit to get to the point, but a lot of people, they get in this path, this very high paying job of just selling everything, holding or flipping just all of these properties. But it seemed like for you found a way to be able to start acquiring and holding a lot of property through this strategy, right, that you're using. So at what point did you decide, okay, I've got some money to provide for my living? Was it simultaneous? Then you decided to start holding, or at what point did you make that transition?
Yeah, it was a year. It was about a year later, 1 year and like 3 months later, I bought my first rental. So in like the summer of 2017, I bought my first one, and that was kind of the plan, more or less, just because I wanted to show my wife that I could like actually generate money through finding deals and flipping them. And so but my next deal, my third deal, was it kind of added a little bit of passive income to our life. And this is kind of where, like, for me, my edge kind of started to shine through, which, everyone is successful in the real estate business. They have some kind of an edge. Some people are just really good at construction and dialing in those costs and managing those projects. Some people are really good at design. Some people are really good at property management. Some people find a niche in a certain asset class, like they're really good at storage units or whatever. My edge, I kind of figured out early on, was in really just making deals, like making win-win scenarios happen for multiple people in a transaction. So like my next deal was a property that I found on Craigslist that I just noticed like the list price was low. I just kind of noticed that right at the bat. I called the guy and I said, hey, can I just drive up to your house right now and I'll sit down with you and I'll give you exactly what you're looking for. And he said, okay. And it turns out the guy was listing it so low because he had gone through a divorce and he didn't want his ex-wife to get a lot of money out of the sale
That
to
never
the
happens,
point that
does it?
he was willing to forego more money just so that she wasn't able to get it, which was fine with me. And so I wrote up the contract, bought the property for $160,000. I raised money to buy it from private investors. And then I sold it to a couple that wanted to live in it. I didn't do anything to the property. I sold it immediately after for $195,000 on seller financed hard money for 9 months, and their interest rate was like 12%. So there was like a $35,000 spread, plus there was the deal that I made with the investor was that, hey, we're going to split this whole deal 50-50. So they were making like a $2,000 payment every month, and I got to keep half. So that was nice. Like for like 9 months, I was just getting $1,000 a month. And then once 9 months down the road, once they refinanced us, I got $17,000 and my investor got $17,000.
Was the investor that financed it to that party that you sold to for 195 the same investor that funded the deal for you up front?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So
I
I
love that.
so I took my contract period, and that's when I looked for that exit strategy, right? And so I was kind of able to like I knew there was, even without that buyer, I knew that it was a good enough deal to where if I split the deal 50-50 with the investor, that they would end up with a great rate of return. And so they did. They got half of that $35,000 spread, and then they also got half the interest rate. So they made a really good yield. I made some passive income, and then I got a chunk on the back end. So I share that just because right away, I was kind of starting to add some cash flowing assets to the balance sheet. But it wasn't until a year after that that I bought my first rental property, which was it was a property that didn't have any equity in it, and they were trying to sell it on the MLS. And if they would have been successful, they would have had to come to closing with like 10 grand because there was just no equity. And so I offered them to take over the loan subject to give them 10 grand. And because they had done some loan modifications, so their payment was really low, and I knew I could cash flow it really well. And so I did that. I went to a private lender and I said, hey, will you put up 20 grand and we'll be 50-50 partners? And 10 of it will go to the seller. 5 of it will go into a reserve account, and the other 5 is going to go into my pocket. And then we'll split the deal 50-50. And so we did that. We cash flowed like $600 a month, and I got paid 5 grand to buy the rental. And then that's kind of how I structured a lot of my rentals for like the next 6 months until I started using my own money.
Dude, I love this. So for people who are listening to this, he could have maybe sold the property to another investor and taken maybe a $5,000 profit, $10,000 profit off the table on each one of these deals, I'm guessing, or maybe even owner finance. But rather than that, he got creative and he found somebody who was willing to pay a higher price, and he structured with a private money lender to basically be the bank for this seller in the first case. In the second situation, regardless though, it's creativity that allowed these deals to come together, right? And you're not the only one who won. The seller won, they got more money in their pocket. The investor won, you won because you got a piece of that. And then also the person who bought the house or lived in the house wins as well. So I just love to talk about that scenario on why anybody would even do that. But you're doing this 10 to 20 times a month, right? You figured out how to tap in and provide a solution to these people. So what is your what's your unique proposition to these people who are in these situations that not a lot of other people are doing? I mean, honestly, I've never really heard of this being offered before. If you don't mind sharing.
So I mean, now, like, pre-foreclosures was a big target for us. And at first it was like, okay, we would knock on these doors, we would cold call, we would send letters, and it was all in an attempt to get a property under contract at a price that made sense to flip. Well, a ton of house flippers kept coming into the space. This was, again, 2016, 17, started to get really competitive. And so I was kind of forced to be a little bit more creative in order to win some of these deals. Because again, I wasn't going to win these deals by having a lean construction crew. I wasn't going to win these deals by having a lean financing arm. I had to win these deals by being a little bit more creative. So we would go into a property, and one of the very first ones we did, I still remember vividly. She responded to one of our mailers, and she said, "Hey, I really need help. My house is in foreclosure, and I got your letter in the mail, and I just want to see what you can offer." And I'm like, "Okay, well, what have you been offered so far?" She said, "I've been getting offers for like 210,000, 205,000." And I said, "How much do you owe the bank?" And she said, "I owe the bank 90,000." And I said, "Stay right there. I'll be there in an hour." And it was an hour drive. So I drove out, met with her, and I said, how come you haven't taken any of these offers? Like 210,000, those seem like pretty fair offers. She said, I don't know. Nothing's really getting me excited. And I said, well, if I bought your house, I wouldn't even be able to pay that. I said, but let me ask you this. What would be the ideal circumstance for you? Like would you, do you even want to leave? Do you even want to move out of this house? And she's like, and then she just kind of like let it all out. She's like, no, my son graduates from high school in June, and I've got another kid who's living with us. My mom lives down in Colorado, and she's got a place for us, but it's not going to be ready until, for another 6 months. And so I said, okay, so sounds to me like if you could just stay here until June, until your son graduates from high school, like that would solve all your problems. She's like, oh my gosh, yes. I said, okay, well, how much can you afford to pay every month, for either a mortgage or rent or whatever? She's like, I can't afford anything. We don't have any money. I said, okay, so how about this? How about I give you $5,000 in cash right now? I let you stay here for the next 6 months for free. And if you leave on time without any fuss, in 6 months from now, I'll give you another $5,000. She said, oh my gosh, you would do that for me? I said, I'd do that for you if you're ready to roll, and if I can step on it and get going, because we got to hurry and stop this foreclosure. And she is in tears. She's like, oh my gosh, that means so much to me. So here I am buying this house for basically $100,000.
Crazy.
And I have to let her lease it for 6 months, which, by the way, I took over her loan subject to, and I only had to come up with like $30,000, of which I borrowed at 12% from a private lender. So like $0 out of pocket. I just had to make her mortgage payment, which was like $560 a month. So I made that mortgage payment for 6 months. And then like 4 days after she moved out, I wholesaled it to a buddy of mine for 210,000, and made that spread. And that's kind of the niche. Like that's kind of how we started keeping a lot of these properties too, is we would go in and we would basically buy these houses for 50 cents on the dollar, and work out a plan for the homeowner to stay there for 2-3 years, sometimes 10 years. And give them the option that, hey, if things change in the next couple of years and you want to buy your house back from us, we'll give you a huge discount. So we'd buy the house for 50 cents on the dollar, and 2 years later we'd sell it back to them for 70 cents on the dollar, and virtually take zero risk the whole time, and help a lot of people stop foreclosure. Now, I don't want to make it sound like it's a charity, because we would, rip these big fees in between.
Sure.
But the alternative was their house goes to auction. They get kicked out. Their dressers thrown out on the front lawn. Their beds, their clothes, everything's just yanked out of their house. And so we provided an alternate for them to be able to stay there.
Dude, I absolutely love this concept. And for people who are tuning in, like, you might be wondering to yourself, yeah, why would anybody do that? But what you have to understand, and Justin would probably agree with me, is that a lot of these people, it's not about the money. It's about the inconvenience. It's about the having to relocate. It's about their sanity at some point. And so really, we're just a consultant. We're asking the right questions. We are providing solutions that nobody else is providing this homeowner. And the guy who offered 210, the guy who probably ended up buying it on the back end, he could have done the same thing. And he also could have bought the house at probably a much lower price if he had offered that 6 months for her to move as well. And so that's what I love about real estate. So for somebody who doesn't understand creative finance, who doesn't understand subject to, what does that look like? Like, how does that take place? You said you're making a mortgage payment. I get it. But just to kind of break it down for somebody who's listening who may not understand what that means.
Yeah. So we go down to the title company. They sign the deed over to me. So I take title. So now I'm on title of the house. But what doesn't happen is the loan doesn't get paid off. Now, the loan is in the seller's name. And so technically, they're still somewhat on the hook for that loan. The bank that lent her the money to begin with, they have the same recourse that they had in the first place, meaning that they still have that house as collateral for that note. But now, in order for me to protect my investment, I have to service that loan so that the bank doesn't take the house away from me. And so then what happens is we work with them to, there's a couple ways to do it. We either log into their mortgage and change their login information, or we work with a third-party servicing company. A lot of it depends on how skeptical they are, because we know we're not going to screw them over. But if they're skeptical that we might, then we'll set it up with a third-party servicing company who can make that mortgage payment, send them statements that shows that it's being made, so that they know that there's nothing to worry about. But
would you only not do that would you only not put it with the servicing company if they were completely cool with you just logging in and making their payments? And would you put it with a servicing company, or not put it with the servicing company because of the extra fees? Or why would you just put everyone with the servicing company?
I mean, for us, it's there on the back end when we go to sell the property. It's just one less signature that we have to track down from them.
Gotcha.
Right. So if we're signing another loan with them, right? So if it's like they owe the bank and we owe them, that's totally fine. We'll do that all day long. But when we go to sell that property, now the title company needs to track down a reconveyance of that loan from them to us. Whereas if we didn't have that wrap mortgage in the middle, then we don't need that signature. And a lot of these people it's a little less easy to track down that signature at the end. So, like there's really not a lot of pros and cons either way, but our traditional method that we've done for whatever reason is just to kind of go around that.
Gotcha. Okay. Got another question. does this property go directly into your company's name? Because I know a lot of people who do these deals at some point in time. I know people say it never happens, but I've heard people talk about how a note is called due. Is that anything you're worried about? And do you do anything to like mitigate that risk?
Yeah, I mean, we've had it happen one time. Um, we do have the property go directly into our company's name. Um, there's some exceptions to that. We've had the loan called due once, and that was when it was a state government lender entity that, like, we're in Utah, so it was a company called Utah Housing was the lender,
Mm,
and they have like their due on sale clause is like a little bit more like it's pretty much a guarantee that it's going to get called due. Um, it it depends on the deal. So if we're buying a property for 50 cents on the dollar, then I'm not worried about it at all, because if the lender calls the loan due, there's so many ways for us to get out of that situation. We can refinance it, we can pay cash. Um, Now we do have language in our contracts with these sellers. Like if we're leasing back a property to a seller, or if they have an option to buy it back from us, we have language that says, hey, look, if your lender calls the loan due, then we no longer have to lease this property at these terms that we signed with you. And your option is no longer valid. However, if we can't figure out a way to finance this long term and we have to turn around and sell it, then we'll give you all the equity above your option price. So like if we buy a property for 200 grand, let's say it's worth 500 grand, we buy it for 200 and they have the option to buy it back from us for 350. If that lender calls the loan due and we can't figure out a way to finance it otherwise, then we'll sell that property for 500 grand and we'll give the seller $150,000. Um, and so we're just not super worried about it, just because of the way that we structure our acquisitions. Like we're never really going into these properties at any more than like 70% of value. Um, and sometimes if we really want to, if we're kind of worried about it, like if, 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 if we're buying it for 70% of value and the interest rate is just like really good and our out of pocket is really low, meaning like our down payments maybe only like 20 grand or something. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll just record a deed of trust, and then we'll have them sign a warranty deed to us, but we won't record it, and we'll just hang
gotcha.
on to it. But we'll sign a trust deed that basically sucks up all the equity in excess of it. So like if we buy a property for 300,000 and it's worth 400,000, we'll record like $150,000 deed of trust, so that
It's kind of like a
like,
second, right? Like
yeah,
it's in addition to the lender.
yeah, we get a
You're not relying.
lender's policy. So like no, there's no liens. Like the current owner couldn't get like a new judgment against them or anything and have it suck up any of our equity.
That's creative. I like that. I've also heard of people putting these in trust before. Have you done that at all, or has that been anything that you've looked at doing at all to protect, or is it just you've figured out the risk versus the reward? It's just not even worth it if you have enough equity.
That's kind of where we've landed. Like we've toyed with the trust idea before, and I think it's probably a valid idea, but the research that we've done on it um, basically tells me that putting in a trust doesn't really protect you that much more. Um, the lender can still call it due. Um, I know there's been conflicting things there. So for us, it's just kind of been we've just done this so many times. This is just kind of how we've done it. We might change how we do it if we start seeing problems with it, but that's kind of where we're at now.
All I gotta say, man, is if it's not broke, I would be worried about it. If you're doing that many at that volume, like, yeah, I mean, if it's working, it's working. So,
Yeah.
must be doing something right. But cool, man. So I had another question I was going to ask. Oh, insurance. Do you add yourself as an additional insured? Do you replace that policy, add yourself as the primary, or does it matter?
Well, it I wish there was a really systematic way to do this, but we haven't found one. Um, lately, the way that we've been going about it is we've just been adding a separate policy and dealing with the fact that it's more expensive and just adding that into our underwriting costs.
Oh, so
Um,
you're not even adding yourself to their policy. You're completely getting another one and leaving it in place.
that's kind of
Maybe.
what we're doing now because it's very difficult to scale. If I was only going to do one of these a month, or a couple of them a year, I would add myself to their policy. Um, the other thing you could do is you could record a deed of trust in second position for all the equity, and then add that company as a
Additional.
mortgagee.
Yeah.
Yeah, like have a mortgagee clause um, on the insurance policy.
But that
But
only protects that equity position then, right? In the second position versus
right,
by being on the
but
main.
if you record it, if you record the amount high enough, like if you buy a property for 200K, it's worth 600K. Like you could record a $400,000 or $500,000 second mortgage and then add yourself as a as a mortgagee. Um, but we we just, in order to scale, the problems that you come across when you're adding yourself to these policies is you're working with a different insurance agent every single time.
Yeah.
Um, and and so it's really difficult to, some of them have no idea what you're talking, most of them have no idea what you're talking about when you say, hey, we bought this, but we're leaving the loan in place, add us to the insurance policy. Most of them have no idea what you're talking about, and that
Right.
conversation becomes very exhaustive really fast. And
Bet.
so and so we've just decided, hey, look, it's just going to cost another $100 a month on all of these. And if the deal doesn't work, penciling that in, then we probably shouldn't do it anyway. And that's kind of how we've managed it at scale. We wish there was an easier way, but that's kind of what we're left with right now.
Okay, that's really good to know. And this strategy is something that we have left, I don't even want to say it, like millions of dollars on the table from all the leads in our database that we haven't been entertaining these options for these sellers. And it's not that we're not providing them multiple options, because we do. But this option is just one that we haven't became an expert at. And so I'm really excited about this to also just make myself realize I'm thinking way too small. We're talking about 10 to 20. I thought, oh, it'd be kind of cool. Wouldn't it be cool or nice if I could do one of these a month? But you're doing 10 to 20 a month. And my brain is kind of just like having a hard time wrapping my head around this. And so how in the world, man, are you doing 10 to 20 of these deals every single month? Like logistics, there's got to be a lot that goes into that. Don't you have like a huge team, or what's that look like? And I know the answer, but I'm just trying to crush some beliefs here when you say your answer here. So
Yeah. Well, so I mean, to clarify, I would say the average is more like 10. Um,
it's a lot.
and yeah, and I, as far as the team goes, we have an acquisition company, and their whole gig is really just marketing to these leads, setting up appointments, and we have this, list of criteria that we need, like pretty much a buy box. Um, and essentially what happens is, leads come in, and the people that set the appointments, they get a copy of a mortgage statement from these people. They get a video walkthrough of their property, and then they compare that with the Zillow estimate and also a CMA that we have 2 different CMAs that we get on each property, and we take the lowest of those 3 values. And we just determine, like, is there enough equity to even talk to this person? Or
so before you get too far into conversation, you are getting that mortgage statement, you're underwriting, you're looking at all these things before you even waste your time.
Right. Yeah. So like our appointment setter basically gets the mortgage statement, gets the CMAs, and the video walkthrough, so we see what condition the property's in. And then from there, and there's other questions too, like they ask them, like, how much can you afford every month to pay? How long are you trying to stay here? Are you trying to hurry and sell it? And then most of them qualify to have another conversation. But if their property is worth $400,000 and they owe $500,000, then there's really just not much we can do. But if their property is worth 400 and they owe 400, but they're only 16,000 behind and they have a 2.8% interest rate, then that's worth taking a look at.
Absolutely.
So acquisition team kind of generates those leads, and I step in usually only if, like, we need to really dial in the terms for somebody. Like if we're not sure what terms to give them, do we give them a 3-year lease back? Do we give them a 2-year lease back? How much can they afford? And that's the part that I really like. Like, I love that game of structuring that deal in a way that works for us and also solves their problems.
Yeah. What I love about this that I want to point out is you're asking them what works for them, realizing that you're getting a heck of a deal on the front end by providing this as a solution for them. But let's just be real. Like, you're not going to be able to charge them $3,000 a month for rent if they can only afford $1,500, but maybe the mortgage is still higher than that. So you might take a haircut on some of these, right? You're not always going to be cash flow positive every single time, right?
Correct. Most of them were cash flow negative, actually. Like, most of them were taking a hit every month. Because that's the problem that we're solving for these people is, they can, like, we just bought one that's they can only afford $500 a month, but we're taking over a $2,000 a month payment.
Wow.
And most people are like, how can you even justify that? Like, how can you justify a negative $1,500 cash flow? And the way that we justify it is, well, we bought the property for $220,000, and it's worth $600, and we're going to give them a 2-year lease, and they have the option to buy the house back from us for $400,000 within that 2-year period. So we're going to make a $200,000 spread or more, and it's going to cost us about $18,000 a year. So over a 2-year period, it'll cost us $36,000 to make a $200,000 spread. I mean, the math checks out.
Yeah, I mean, I could live with that. That's not a bad deal whatsoever. I love that, dude. Wow. I am super impressed. My mind is somewhat blown by this concept. By the way, guys, if you have questions for Justin, I feel like I'm just getting all the good questions answered here. So if you guys have questions, make sure to drop them in the chat. Let him know, and then he'll get those questions answered for you. But in the meantime, man, you're doing a lot of other things. I know we dug really deep into, subject to creative finance. Are you taking every one of these through a traditional title company? Are you closing all of these through a closing company, or are you doing it outside of closing, or what's that look like?
We definitely try to. Sometimes the foreclosure auction is so soon that we can't get a legitimate closing scheduled. And so that requires a little bit of a dice roll, right?
I would say so. Yeah.
what we do is we get a title report pulled, and the title report, if the title report is clean, there's some scenarios where, like, if they have an FHA loan or a VA loan, where it becomes a little bit more tricky to purchase the property subject to that mortgage. There are very few title companies that will insure around an FHA or a VA loan. They do exist, but they're few and far between. And so some states, since we're doing this in multiple states, some states we just we don't know those title companies. We just don't know them. We don't have those relationships built. And so what we've had to do is we call it bareback. We bareback the property. So we make sure the title is clean, and we get them to sign a warranty deed or a deed of trust, depending on how we want to do it. We send someone down to the county to record the warranty deed, and then we reinstate the mortgage.
So you get that transfer first before you put money up.
Always. We always do. Yes. We always make sure that the title transfers, that it's recorded, that it passes before we send in the money. Sometimes it's like right at the buzzer, and there's been times where we've had to wire the money, but we give them instruction to not use the funds until we give them the thumbs up
to the seller,
to the foreclosing attorney.
Oh, to the foreclosure attorney.
Yeah, like the people that are actually going to auction off the property, we can send them, the reinstatement funds, which will stop the auction.
Gotcha.
But we make sure that first we have the warranty deed or a deed of trust before we do that.
Which is then recorded with the county.
Yeah, we make sure it's recorded first.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. This is a masterclass on subject 2. Thank you for getting into the details here. I'm going through this stuff, and so I have all these questions. And so I know if you're not familiar with this, guys, this could be an overload of information here, but just understand there are so many ways to buy houses, and it's really by having these creative solutions where you can help people and you can get paid well doing it too. So what's next, man? I mean, I know we've talked about the acquisitions company. I know we talked about some other bigger stuff that you're doing as well, but what's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing right now is we're starting a fund for this strategy. We're putting together between $5 and $10 million bucks. That's just going to be foreclosure fund. We're just going to be stopping foreclosures, reinstating mortgages, and working out deals with people that don't want to leave. And the deal flow's gotten to the point where we used to do 1, 2, maybe 3 of these a month. And so I would just use my own capital over and over and over again. And, each deal was taking 40, 50 grand. And that was my favorite place to put my money, was just back into these foreclosures. I mean, we turned, I don't know if I told you this, but between 2018 and 2021, we turned 400 grand into $10.5 million. Just using this same process.
You told me this offline, and I wrote this down, and I told my business partner, I'm like, holy cow, there's something here that ROI is unheard of. That's insane. Couldn't do that.
It is. And it's a little misleading because so much of that value is created as with so many different hats. It's not all a return on capital. A lot of it is a return on time and effort and expertise and all that stuff. But to your question on what's next, well, that's what's next is we're raising this fund. It's going to be like a 5-year fund. We're just going to buy a ton of these houses, these foreclosures, and we're going to crush it with this fund.
I love it, man. The opportunity has never been so good, honestly. With what's going on right now, you're going to be able to help so many people, and it's going to do really well. I'm excited for you. Let me see here. There was one other thing. Oh, what was it? I mean, gosh, I can't believe nobody has any questions, guys. Where are your questions at? This is a master class here. Justin is a wealth of knowledge. Really excited, man, to see how that goes. And it came to me. How are you finding all these deals? How are you finding all these properties?
Yeah, so we market to the foreclosure data is all public record. So we pull all this foreclosure data. A lot of counties we have to hire someone to actually go into the counties and and scrape this data and then put it in spreadsheets for us. And then from there, it's just a matter of sending them, just like anything else. We send them just the typical correspondence. Like sometimes we'll text them, we'll give them calls, send them letters and postcards. And
are you addressing the situation? Are you keeping it vague? Because I've heard people saying don't address the situation. I've heard it multiple ways, but I haven't targeted this niche as much as you have. So I'm curious.
Yeah, we do address it. We basically just say, hey, we noticed that your lender, recorded some problem on the property with the county, and we're just wondering if you want to stay or if you were trying to sell it.
I love that.
And we feel that opening, what that does is it kind of puts the blame on the lender and not them. Because they all have their own problems with the lender. They all hate their lender for whatever reason. So it kind of like puts you on the same team as them, saying, hey, your lender's the bad guy. They recorded some problem. So then 2, what it does is it shows, how did we even get their information? It's like, well, it's on the county. We saw it. And then 3, it asks them, like, are you trying to stay? Or are you trying to hurry and sell? And we just kind of wait for that response. We're not really in the business of trying to convince people to be motivated, and to convince them to talk to us. For us, it's a game of just turning over as many rocks as possible until you find the one person that's like, please help me. Please,
yep.
Please, like, I really need your help. And those are the people that we're able to help the most, are the people that say they want to be helped and that they're willing to share any information. They're willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to walk us through their whole life. We can't really help someone that keeps their cards close to the vest, because we just don't know what areas we can add the most value. Like if that lady hadn't told me about her son graduating high school in June, I would have just been throwing spaghetti at the wall. I'd be like, well, what if we give you 3 years? What if we give you 2 months? What if we I wouldn't have been able to help her nearly as much as we did. And so we just turn over the rocks until we find the people that are willing to be helped.
Yeah, and that's the best way to do business. I found that too, and that's why I love inbound marketing. Hence my shirt, right? TV. I love inbound, but I mean, this is such a niche. It's just a matter of conversations, right? And Roger has a question here. It says, I was curious of how you found your pre-foreclosure leads. If they're scheduled for auction with the attorney, you can still potentially stop it.
Yeah, we find them. It depends on the county. We either hire people to go pull the data from the county, or we subscribe to mass listing services, just like the ones that we've talked about, like PropStream. There's quite a few of them that mass compile the data, and some of those counties are accurate, some of them are not. The ones that are not, we try to fine tune that with people that actually pull the data directly. And then the other part of the question, what was the other part of the question? Oh, yes. If they're scheduled for auction, that's the main list that we go after. We mainly go after people that have an auction already scheduled.
Beautiful. There you have it. So, yeah, by the way, guys, PropStream is a great provider. I've used them quite a bit. If you're interested in a free trial, I do have a link. No shame here. It's an affiliate link, but it does give you a free trial. If you wanted to check it out, you can check out that link there, and that'll get you a free trial. And then also, yeah, I mean, batch leads. There's a lot of providers out there that have information. I've always found county data is the best. It's the most up to speed and all of that, but it does take time. So it's like a trade-off there, right? It takes some time to pull it. Absolutely, Roger. Awesome. We've been on here for an hour and 5 minutes. This is longer than we usually go, but I appreciate all of your knowledge, man. I love hearing about your successes and excited to hear how the fund venture goes. I know you're going to crush it. So with that being said, any last thoughts to leave listeners with?
I would just say if you or if any of your listeners, if you stumble across leads and you're not sure how to deal with them, like, we're more than happy to, like, if you come across a pre-foreclosure lead and they want to stay in the house and you're not sure the best way to structure it, we'd be happy to partner on those leads. We're going to have a big war chest of capital to be able to buy these properties. So, we're good group to wholesale to, and a good group to partner with if you're not exactly sure how to structure something, or, even if you just want to kind of watch and learn for the first few of them.
Yeah. And talk about a very cheap education, right? He's talking about doing $200,000 spreads, guys. So take Justin up on that. Where can people follow you and learn more about you?
Instagram, you can reach me on Instagram. It's Huston Hammond. It's just my first and last initials are switched around on Instagram.
I like it.
You can, I'm not very active on social media, but you can send me a message there and follow me there and chat real estate or business or whatever you want to do.
I love it, man. Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. If you guys got value from this show today, go ahead and like, subscribe, share it out, tell a friend. This is truly a master class on subject to creative finance. And so thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate your time today, Justin. And with that, it's a wrap. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks.